everyone. I'm excited for you to join us today to celebrate Airbyte's 1.0 launch. My name's Kat Wilson, and in addition to being your moderator today, I am a program manager on Airbyte's Connector Catalog team. Let me just start by saying thank you for being part of our wonderful community. Your contributions mean the world to us, and we really could not have gotten here today without you. We appreciate your role in helping us make data available for anyone, anywhere. We have a fantastic panel lined up for you. If you've joined us before, you might see some familiar faces here. Our guests are some tremendously talented, tenacious founders involved in the AI and data spaces. Joining us, we have our very own Michelle Tricot of Airbyte, our friend down at Langchain, Harrison Chase, Nick Schrock at Dagster, and Tristan Handy of DBT Labs. Together, we're going to explore how AI is impacting the data landscape. So to start off, guys, I thought we'd just do a quick round of introductions. Michelle, Harrison, Nick, Tristan, if you could first just introduce yourself, your company, and then tell us a little bit about how your open source community has impacted your startup.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. So I've been in the data space and engineering startup for the past almost 20 years now. And today I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Airbyte. And Airbyte is for those who don't know, it's an open data movement platform, meaning that we help every single people to connect data systems together so that they can extract value out of the data that they own. And when we started Airbyte, very much focused on the analytics use case about like lending data into data warehouses and data lakes. And today, like talking about the community, we've seen a pretty large pull into bringing data into operational system. And the main one we've seen was around like RAG type of application. So people building and developing AI application that require access to more data. And this is one of the example of how the community is pulling us. And other than that, like the community we've been very fortunate to have this very large group of people just helping us, helping each other, and to building higher quality connector, helping each other to be successful with the platform, and just contributing to make the product amazing. So that's all for me.
Great, Harrison.
Hey, I'm Harrison, co-founder and CEO of Langchain. Thanks for having me, Michelle and Kat and all of Airbyte. My background's in machine learning and machine learning operations. So worked at a few places, but started Langchain as an open source project, just as a side project about 2 years ago at this point, and then as a company shortly after. And as a company, we build developer tools to help people build applications with large language models, specifically ones where they're using the large language models to interact with external sources of data or computation. And the community's played a huge role in kind of like Langchain and where we are. As I said, we started as an open source project. It was right before ChatGPT, and a lot of people got interested in this, right after that moment. And so we saw a huge influx of people wanting to build things and a lot of contributions around lots of different integrations, lots of different use cases, lots of different docs. And I think the overarching thing that we believe is it's extremely early on in this space and it's really fast moving. And so the community has been a tremendous part of just, helping push us along the way and being a part of that journey.
Great, thanks so much, Harrison. Nick?
Hi, I'm Nick Schrock. I'm the CTO and founder of Dagster. It's a data orchestration platform that's kind of data asset oriented. So we not just do orchestration, but we have built-in lineage, cataloging across any technology. And what we really end up being used for is the control plane for people's data platforms. My background is dev tools. I kind of bulk of my career was at Facebook. And they're best known as being one of the co-creators of GraphQL and kind of worked side by side with the React team as well. Like to say I was present at the creation of the full hipster stack. In terms of the community, I really think about how the community has been so influential in our product roadmap. In terms of you kind of go out on a project and you state what your principles are, and it's fascinating to see who comes in to kind of fill that space. And in some ways, like the wand chooses a wizard there. And we've really, evolved and co-evolved the system side by side with our key users and contributors.
Awesome. Tristan?
The wand chooses the wizard. Have you used that before, or did you just come up with that on the spot? That was great.
I think I came up with it when I was thinking about how to answer the question, but yeah.
I really feel that too. Maybe I'll try to like pivot on that too. Hi, I'm Tristan Handy, CEO and founder of DBT Labs. I'm actually kind of glad that Harrison went first because I have a lot of resonance with that story. Langchain was built to as I would almost consider it like a user interface on top of like a new compute construct, the large language model. DBT had a very similar role to play in the it being the user interface on top of a new compute construct, the cloud-oriented data warehouse, data lake. You release new types of compute into the world, and you need interfaces to let users actually make use of them in a low friction way. And so DBT's been at that for about 8 years. We have a large community. The part of the journey that we're in as a company right now is there's a certain set of early adopters that will see a thing out in the world and they'll say, "Holy shit, I need that," and they'll use it themselves. And then there's this other set of organizations that typically come from like much larger companies that need more than kind of like a core seed of an idea to like make use of a thing. So what we are in process of right now is we DBT Cloud facilitates the entire analytics development lifecycle, start to back, and it's a very opinionated way to think about doing analytics. We are now in process of taking that opinionated method of doing analytics and helping large organizations get on board with that. And that often involves not just technology development, but also like organizational change and reshuffling of who does what work and how.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's amazing to hear from all of you how these open source contributors can really just shape our product roadmaps and help us take our companies in ways that we didn't expect them to go in. Given that, like a lot of our listeners that are here today and people within our communities are data practitioners. And they're either early adopters in the AI space or they're looking for ways to get more involved in that. There's lately been a lot of enthusiasm around RAG and LLMs and eugenic systems, and there's no AI without data. So I wanted to start off by kind of exploring where data and AI are intersecting. So Harrison, I'd love to get your opinion first, since you're coming at this from a slightly different angle than the rest of the people on this call. Like, how do you see the worlds of data and AI coming together?
Yeah, absolutely. And my background is much less in the data engineering field than everyone else on this call. So I will not try to speak towards that. But I think like from my perspective, a lot of the interesting use cases that people are building with LLMs, they're not just using the LLM by itself. Like if it was just that, it would be, just another kind of like, it would be a very, very thin wrapper on top of ChatGPT or something like that. A lot of the interesting use cases are when you combine it with other things. And oftentimes that other things is data. I think that informs a lot of what the differentiated kind of like product experiences are. And the data can be in a bunch of different formats. So you mentioned RAG. I think one of the most common things that we see people doing is, LLMs operate on unstructured data. There is a lot of unstructured data out there. You can take that unstructured data, you can vectorize it, put it in a vector store, query it, and then get back chunks of data that you then pass to the LLM. And so that's a pretty common workflow that we've seen a lot of people do, and that requires a whole data ingestion pipeline to get the data in the right format where it can be accessed in that workflow. But I'd also flag that that's not the only way that you can combine data with LLMs. You can also combine structured data with LLMs. So we see a lot of interest in kind of like using LLMs to do some form of querying of structured data, whether that be writing SQL, working with CSV, something like that. And there's a whole spectrum of what that looks like because as I'm sure a lot of the people on this call will tell you, like, it's easy to do that if it's a simple data schema. It's really hard to do that when it's really like messy. And so that's still like, that's a huge area of kind of like research we see being done. And then a third thing that I'd flag in just in terms of like how data and LLMs interact, there was actually a cool blog post the other day about using feature stores to bring real-time data to LLMs. And I think specifically at kind of like personal level. So like at a user level, basically. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of the power of LLMs is their ability to just generate unique things. And that's really awesome if you do it specific to each user, because then you can have a personalized experience and it can, in theory, be like better and more tailored towards you. And we have kind of like feature stores that have been around for a while as part of the ML systems, and you know those bring a combination of structured and unstructured data, and so there's this whole pipeline there that's still incredibly valuable for LLMs. So I think like to wrap it all up, like you have to combine LLMs with some other data to make them actually interesting, and there's just a bunch of different ways that we see people doing, and that's constantly evolving.
Great. Tristan or Nick, do you want to talk about maybe any ways you're seeing people use your platforms in combination with some of these AI tools?
I'm happy to say a couple words, and then maybe Nick, you can make me sound smarter. The DBT is used as a precursor step to the LLM work. So you get a bunch of data, you get it in your processing environment, and then you. I think it is certainly true of analytics, and I think it is going to end up being true of AI as well, that you don't actually want to take random raw data that has not had any processing applied to it and shove it directly into the context of an LLM. So what DBT helps you do in this context is actually get to a transformed data set that is trustworthy and ready to be treated as kind of gospel going into a context window. We don't, as a product, as a company, we don't have visibility into what is happening downstream of us. And so one of the things that was most interesting to me recently is we did a survey of our users. And one of the questions that we asked them was, how many of you have pipelines, DBT pipelines, that are powering downstream AI systems? And I kind of expected the answer to be like 5%, 10%, I don't know, something like that. And the answer was 25%. And then, or like, I can't remember, it was like on the order of 25%. And then there was another group of people that said, we expect this to be true within the next 12 months. And that was another 30%. And so if you take those two groups of people, like, we are doing this now, and we expect to be doing this in the next 12 months, you have a majority of DBT pipelines are one of the outputs that they are being fed into is AI, large language model oriented systems. And so this is exciting to me. One of the things that you want to do when you're building infrastructure is you want to build stuff that unlocks creativity of downstream use cases. So you actually don't know. The people that laid the original fiber of the internet like actually couldn't foresee what that fiber would get used for. And I think that in many of the same ways, the people that are building data infrastructure today did not anticipate the AI boom that has happened over the past 2 years, but we're all very happy that there's additional use cases for our technology.
Tristan, one follow up there is, do you see like different ways that people are using DBT depending on whether it's being consumed by AI or consumed by humans downstream? Like, are there different transformations or flows or considerations that they're doing?
So you mentioned feature stores. One of the things that I'm very interested in is the like lower latency use cases that I think are very, very relevant for AI. I don't think in general DBT plays a part of the more low latency stuff today. I think it is more oriented toward, like, you can imagine an end-to-end pipeline that like creates a customer 360 and then helps you in the context of like a support chat experience, and that the latency there, probably an hour, is actually totally acceptable and whatever. So I think that's the main difference today. It is mostly about delivering kind of 360 information on a customer or on some other object that you care a lot about on a consistent basis.
Yeah, one of the places where I see a lot of whenever we talk to our community about how they're building their AI application, is we realize that today a lot of it is very, very verticalized, meaning that they are really building from top to bottom, and they're trying to really build the whole thing from the beginning, which actually makes a lot of sense. Like if you look at past technology, whenever you build something that is new, you want to keep the control, and the platform play is generally a little bit delayed. Now, the thing that people reach out to us for is they realize that data it's a manufacturing process. Like what you're saying, Tristan, is you go from a raw piece of material and you need to end up at the end of the factory with something that you can drive, like a car or whatnot. And when people are building these applications, they're realizing that they are starting to, in a way, like discovering or rediscovering like this manufacturing process and turning into, okay, what is the state of the art here? Like, how do people solve that manufacturing problem? And well, people call it ELT, ETL, whatnot. It doesn't matter. It's a manufacturing process, and that's really where I see like potentially the first platform play to happen and to be developed is how do you ensure a level of quality, a level of latency, of SLA on top of your data before you start consuming it. In terms of what we've seen in changes, latency, I agree, is it's a big difference. Like when you live in the analytics world, latency is kind of important, but well, an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, it doesn't make a huge difference in general. But here you're powering an operational system, and if you're doing your customer 360, you're closing, I don't know, a Salesforce opportunity. You want to make sure that you don't have to wait an hour to see that in your downstream systems. Like, how do you accelerate that thing? But those are problems that, like, those are, I would say, like the main difference that I'm seeing today on like how the manufacturing happens. Is like it has to go faster, and focusing on platform that build faster this process piece of data is probably a big undertaking on the data space today.
In terms of what we're seeing at Dagster on this front about how AI applications, I think the people who are getting value right now, not theoretical, are people building effectively RAG or other computations over unstructured data in the enterprise, and there's super interesting use cases there. But what I when I signed up for this panel as AI focus, I was like scared that maybe the conversation would get to like, oh, there's not going to be software engineers anymore, and that sort of stuff. Like, there's this joke that there's AI doomers out there, like the people who want to bomb the data centers, and I'm more like an AI boomer, where I feel like I have a balanced approach to this. It's cool. I love hearing what Harrison was saying about how people are kind of recombining. It's not just wrappers over ChatGPT, right? Which I think is like getting to a reasonable reality, which is like these are incredibly powerful core computing primitives that need to be composed to make interesting applications happen. And I think what practitioners are going to find is that this is going to go through a cycle, kind of like data science did 10 years ago, where like it's the new sexiest job ever. And it does change the world forever. But then people, as the unstructured models get commoditized, realize that all the value is in the data platform. And so many of the LLM folks are going to end up being drawn and shifted left into the generalized data platform, because that's what's going to be a differentiator at the enterprise. At least that's what I think is going to happen. So, software engineering isn't going away. Data platform engineering is not going away. But like anything else, like the tools are going to have to reflexively respond to fit these new use cases. But it's going to be interesting to see.
I really like that point, Nick. Both you and Tristan are kind of echoing how AI is trendy right now, but it's not quite a tool in the toolbox yet. Like, people are still exploring different ways to use that. It sounds kind of like you think that AI has not yet made its massive impact in the data ecosystems. Anyone kind of want to counter that, or are we in agreement that we're still in the early phases here?
Well, I like Tristan's analogy of the internet. Tristan, I know I just jumped on you, but I like the analogy of the internet. We're like kind of in the pets.com era of AI, right? Where there's just kind of there's some like fakery happening and like hyper, you know, inflated valuations for this stuff, and that's fine. Like I think it's a natural part of the process. I think it will be revolutionary, like the internet, and completely be a new platform. But Tristan, I'll hand it off to you. I thought the internet laying fiber analogy was really good.
Yeah, you can talk about all kinds of analogies. Apparently, Mark Andreessen hates the internet analogy because the internet has network effects that AI doesn't have. Whatever, he can talk on his own platform about that. But um, I I fundamentally think that this is a capital intensive cycle, and that is one of the reasons that it is very different than the data infrastructure cycle before it. Data infrastructure fundamentally didn't require like new like physical atoms going anywhere. Like the data center build out continued, but like that had been going on forever, and it didn't really require any change to the curve there. Um, what is happening today has more boom and bustiness to it because all of the hyperscalers and Nvidia and like et cetera, you can actually see this boom show up on their balance sheets in a way that you could not see that appear in other, and then that flows through to the stock market, and it creates a lot of buzziness that otherwise people wouldn't care about. Like it tends to like turn people's heads when Nvidia, a company that like only gamers had heard about 10 years ago, like all of a sudden is the most valuable company in the world. Like that's really weird. So I think that there's a lot of reasons that this is noisy, and the noise can be counterproductive to those of us who are like on this call and like actually engaged in the doing the work part. But also it can be productive because it generates interest and signups and capital inflows and all of that stuff. So you just have to be a little patient as a founder and recognize that two things are true at the same time, which is like, one, there's actually a lot of important work going on here. And two, right now, the amount of value being created is probably not living up to the hype yet. And that's not a statement that it won't, but that it has not yet.
Michelle, I can tell that you're chomping at the bit to hop on in here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything. You will always have the early adopters. You will always have the later adopters. You always have like how do you develop today? You do the full vertical development, or you go for the platform play. We're very much in the early adopter stage, but the thing that every single person is doing today is they are discovering for themselves, like whether it's the smallest possible startup in the world versus like the big bank of the world, they are all experimenting because they don't know what's going to happen, but they understand, as you're saying, that if it can change so dramatically the direction of Nvidia, there is something that is going to change in the world, and they are all just investing there. Like I would say right now, it's I think companies owe it to themselves to allocate a part of their capital and the people that are working there to explore. And it doesn't have to be about building, but it's at least about using. And just to use Airbyte as an example, obviously, we were struggling with like community, like interaction, support, etc., like because it was so big. And very, very fast, I think it was back in June, we started to invest into June 2023, like not June 2024. We started to invest in more tooling just to get ourselves also more familiar with how can that help our business, how that can help us scale. So I won't say that the solution is perfect, but at least it's there. And now it's part of our daily life. And we know how to use it. We know how to how to leverage it and to extract value from it. And it's going to be a big learning process, but company needs to invest today into it. Otherwise, I'm a firm believer that they will be missing the wagon and just become irrelevant. But you owe it to yourself to invest there.
Harrison, my understanding is that you're like Langchain is one of the primary places that people do this experimentation. Is that fair to say? Like, is Langchain often like the first place that people go to when they're like, I want to mess around and like see if I can hack something together?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think that's accurate.
Do you get to see like the patterns of how people are doing this experimentation and like how much of it ever goes to prod versus gets like scrapped on the showroom floor? Like how is this working in practice?
I think we do get to see that. I think I honestly agree with a lot of everything you guys have said. Like it's still really early on. I don't think anyone is like under assumptions that it's not early on. I don't think anyone really knows how the space is going to shake out. If we're being honest, like there are big questions around are LLMs commodities or are they not? And I think you can make arguments either way, and that changes each month. Is a vector database a standalone type of database or not? Same like all these types of conversations. Like, no one really knows, I think, and some things are more clear than others. But there's so much that's still up in the air. Completely agree with what Michelle said about just experimenting. I think the CEO of Klarna was on a podcast recently where he was talking about how they were building out their internal customer support thing, or actually it was something else. It was something else. And he basically said like, yeah, we ended up kind of like not using the product, not that we built internally, but it wasn't a waste of time or resources. We learned so much in that process, and that's impacting other things. So I think a lot of companies are viewing this as kind of like investment in learning. In terms of like things that are going into production, or I mean, I think there's some stat or made up stat or folklore stat about traditional ML projects that like 85% of them don't go to production or something like that. And honestly, I'd say that's pretty accurate and pretty similar. And I think the same reasons are probably consistent for traditional ML data science versus AI projects. Like it's often kind of like underspecified when you start. It's often a harder problem than you think it might be. You often need data that just doesn't exist. Like data is the backbone of a lot of these things. So yeah, there absolutely are a lot of projects that don't make it into production for a variety of reasons, but we see a lot of interest in experimenting. And we do see that, I think there are a lot of like simple RAG style things in production. I think there are a lot of like what I'd say like features in production where it's like a single LLM call. It's not like a whole product by itself, but you can tack on an LLM call and that's a feature, and now your product has some AI. But what we're really excited about are like the like AI native applications. You could call them agents. Agents is an overloaded word, but like this style of an LLM that controls a lot of the decision making and thinks about what to do. And there's this whole spectrum of agenticness. But what's exciting to me is we're starting to see like more agentic things go into production. So Elastic is an example of a company that we work with that has an assistant, which is basically an agent in production for troubleshooting some of their issues. Klarna has their customer support bot. Customer support is a great industry. We're seeing for this. There are a lot of startups doing this as well. AI SDRs recently. There's been a whole bunch of startups there that have things that work, and coding is also another one where things don't really work yet, but there's so much promise there that there's a lot of attention there. But across all of these, like it's still just so early on. So I agree with like everything that was said before. Like I think it's going to be transformational. At the same time, I think it's super early on, and there's a lot of things being done now that aren't creating as much value as people think there should be, or the hype is causing.
The thing when we say that companies need to be using it and are experimenting with it, I agree on the fact that you cannot just have like see that as a silver bullet today, which is going to solve every single one of your problem. Like a lot of these projects, sometimes they fail because you see that as a magical tool that's going to do everything for you. And you realize that very quickly you don't get to that value at the end of the day. And that makes a lot of these projects to actually fail. We've been guilty of that. Like we just released the AI builder. Like we started to think about, can it build a connector end to end? Well, it doesn't. But how can you leverage it to actually go step by step and decompose the process so that you start getting the ROI faster than just trying to do the thing end to end? And to me, that's a pretty elegant way of making this project successful, is be ambitious, but also be like, take it step by step, decompose like how you're approaching it.
And don't underestimate the value of productivity increases. Like, yes, the end-to-end magical agentic connector builder didn't work, but maybe you made it 2 or 3 times as fast to build it, which is like insanely valuable. I think that people shoot for the 100% solution when like the 80% solution is amazing, and people should lose sight of that. Should not lose sight of that.
You use the word like magical, and I think that's part of the issue as well. People expect these things to be magical and they expect it to just work, and it doesn't, and it's still a lot of work, and you've got to like roll up your sleeves and like think about it carefully and get the right data and do some data munging and all of that. And it's not a silver bullet. And I think a lot of people try out Langchain or try out an LLM and they're like, oh, why isn't this agent doing what I want it to do? Okay, AI is overrated. Like, no, that's not the case. Still work. It's just a tool. Like a database doesn't do everything for you. You still got to use it correctly. So
yeah, and now it takes just a few minutes to build a connector, but you have to click buttons and validate, and bit by bit is going to be the silver bullet.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking this kind of away from the macro perspective and zooming in into how people are using your products and encouraging our community to just kind of get out there and explore some of these AI tools and not be afraid of not being able to take it all the way with them. But I do want to shift our conversation a little bit to the reason that we're here today. Airbyte's going 1.0. Nick, Tristan, you guys have, pretty recently been in that position. What does being 1.0 mean to you? Why don't we start off with Tristan?
Oh, it was a little while ago for us. We I mentioned before that we're 8 years into the journey now. We 1.0'd at like 3.5 or 4 years in. I can't remember exactly the date. I think that there's like a very kind of technical answer to this question, which is to say that like 1.0.0 is semantic versioning, and you have major minor patch, and that is all about what you're allowed to break and for whom. And 1.0 is a commitment to maintaining backwards compatibility for all of your users that are on all of the constructs that you have shipped in one that piece of software. And probably you're not going to 2.0 for a little while. And so that's a pretty long-term commitment, especially to a startup that has only existed for I don't actually remember how long it's been, Michelle, but it's only a few years at this point. So making big commitments can feel scary. It was very scary for us because up to that point, anytime that we realized, we didn't like the way that the Lightning port connected to the iPod, we just said, screw it, we're going to Thunderbolt or whatever. And at 1.0, we took it very seriously that like these programming constructs are one that we had to support moving forwards, and we've maintained that commitment for 4-ish years now. So I congrats for getting here, and this is when it gets hard.
Yeah, I think for people who aren't in the kind of founder's chair or a product chair, the 1.0 is not a product launch. Well, I don't want to speak for anyone, but it's not a product launch. It is a repositioning of your product. And what Tristan says is absolutely correct. It has a bunch of process implications, but it also has I kind of think of it, it's like graduating from high school, where the day after you don't feel any different, but all of a sudden the world starts engaging with you a little differently. And different types of folks start talking to you in different ways. And so it's really about how you're positioning yourself in the world. You know, talking to more mature customers, people are like, oh, we were waiting for you to do this, blah, 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 because they were waiting for the process changes that Tristan was talking about in a concrete sense. But they're also waiting for that vibe shift. It's like, oh, okay, this organization is now serious about like how it presents itself in the world. So
you're saying that Airbyte can now vote.
Yeah, you don't feel it. Go ahead.
Airbyte can now vote.
Right, exactly.
That's a good one. Yeah, you know, for like we've not been around like for 8 years. We've been like the project has been around like for maybe 3.5 years. There was a lot of talk around during the past 3.5 years about, oh, let's move to 1.0, let's move to 1.0, and we never went for it. And there were a few reasons for that. Is I agree with the concept of graduating. Is it's not just about the product itself; it's also about how you behave as a team, how you are, like how you're making decision, the speed at which you're making it, the thoughts that you put behind. And for us, yes, of course, there is the product aspect of it, which is like we rewrote massive parts of Airbyte for the launch of 1.0 for like reliability, deployment, enterprise, enterprise adoption, etc., etc. But for us, it was also, well, now that you're 1.0, you're getting all these enterprise customers. Like, how do you support them? And it is part of how we're thinking about 1.0. It cannot just be the product. It's also about how like what people can expect of you as an organization and as a product. And support is one, sales is one, marketing is one. The way we also work with our community is also improving massively in terms of like champions program, PR, SLAs, etc., etc. So for me, it was really about, have we created the right systems internally to support the external expectation? And until 1.0, you have a bit of leeway. Like people give you some the benefits of the doubt when you break stuff, etc., etc. Now you cannot, and you need to make sure that yes, you have you can handle it. And that's why for us like 1.0 was is such an important milestone. Is we're ready for the world.
So Michel, we did it.
What's
next? What's next for Airbyte?
Yeah, so there is a few things here, which is enterprise is a big deal for us. Like when, you know, I always tell to people that if they had access to our CRM of people using Airbyte, people would be very jealous because there is a lot of the top 100 companies in there. For us, it's like, how do we double down on these customers, on these users? Like, how do we best address data use cases? How do we best position ourselves on the AI space? How do we and providing value for like AI use cases? Like right now, it's very community driven. We're working a lot with the community. Like, what else do we need to do to make them even more successful the moment they start going for like a platform, like looking for a platform rather than building everything vertically? Enterprise is a big deal for us. We have a lot of users that are using it, but as you said, sometimes they just wait, hey, what can I expect from a 0.5? Well, 0.5 is not 1.0. Now it's 1.0, and that gives us much stronger argument for the later adopters. So that's going to be a big push on our side. The piece that I was saying about data latency is actually pretty important to us. You know, we've been very optimized for like, this is more like on the product side and technical side for like these micro batches, but we're seeing more and more use case for, hey, how fast can you get the data from point A to point B? Because now my operational systems rely on that data. And that's going to be a big undertaking for us on getting those requirements into the platform. Like in a way, like graduating from analytics and BI into really this operational system. So yeah, that's lot of things to do, a lot of things to still figure out. Startups is hard. Like, it feels like the world is realizing that startups are hard. I was just reading this article from The Information, like, hey, ex-Googler say that building a startup is really hard. Yeah, it is really hard. Like, you have this massive...
No, the wording was they found out that it's really hard, which was hilarious.
Yeah, and so far that's why it's really this graduation piece of we're a startup still, but we're a startup plus. And where does the next stage of the startup get us to, and how do we continue to bring more people to do more with data?
Well, Michelle, I'm going to speak for myself and also for the rest of our community. We are very excited to be on this journey with you. Harrison, Nick, Tristan, thanks so much for taking the time to share your insights with us today. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the role of community in open source companies to the impacts of AI in the data landscape, and made some suggestions on how you out there can start experimenting. If you're interested in following any of our panelists' socials for insights on data and AI, or joining their company's communities of Dagster, DBT Labs, or Langchain, we'll link out to all that great stuff. Thank you again for joining us for Airbyte 1.0 launch. This concludes our day's activities, and we look forward to staying in touch with you as we help make your data AI actionable anywhere. Thanks.